And welcome to another post-game edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 1053 The Fan. Not the way we wanted it to end tonight, as it looked like the Stars were going to pull off 2 points, but unfortunately, they fall towards the end with Colorado getting a late period goal, and then a follow-up with the great Nathan McKinnon in overtime as they take out the Stars. Stars do pick up a point, but it's not one of those things where you leave the barn happy with just a point. I am happy to be joined by Robert Tiffin. He is of D Magazine, and always great to have Robert on this post-game show. How are you, sir?
Doing all right. I stayed out of any collisions or cross-checks, so I'm feeling pretty good.
I guess we should start there. A lot of chatter about the refereeing tonight, and I did want to get your thoughts. Calls, missed calls.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was the game, but wanted to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's pretty rare where you can say, oh, we did everything right in the game, where a team would say that, and then this call got wrong, and so that soured the whole thing for us, right? That's pretty rare. Sometimes it'll happen, like playoff overtime. Occasionally you hear that or whatever, and then there's a lot of chatter for a day or two. This wasn't that. I think in the second, the Avs had some grief about the high sticking call that led to that power play goal.
Yes.
And certainly, the Stars on their broadcast pointed out a couple Josh Manson cross checks, one on Duchesne right before a rather iffy call on Dadonov that led to an Avs power play goal. So you could say it evens out there, right? Each team got a power play, and they might quibble with, the double minor, or they might quibble with the missed call right before the other call, etc. But at the end of the day, each team scored a power play goal, and the mistakes that lost this game for Dallas probably weren't made by the refs at the end of the day.
Yeah. I guess that's the follow-up question then. What were your thoughts on the mistakes tonight?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to, get inside a coach's head, especially right after a tough game like this with an injury to your best player. When obviously the mood is going to be for everyone except Jim Nill, the mood is probably going to be pretty rough. You have to look at that at overtime, right? At least that's where you start. And then you have to look at that goal at the end of, actually, I'd say you look at two goals. You look at both of those kind of comeback goals where the Avs punched back right after the Stars went up. Both of those were kind of tough. That's, you don't really want that, especially the goal right at the end. At the end of the second for the Avs. You really want to go into the intermission with a 2-goal lead there, have your game plan, but instead Drew in scored to make it 3-2, and so then the Avs started the third, a little closer than they otherwise would have been. You can't play what if, but if the Avs don't get that goal, then that Tyler Seguin fourth goal for the Stars makes it a 4-1 game, and that third period probably looks a whole lot different from that point. The other mistake, of course, is Jason Robertson losing the puck in overtime, but overtime had so many chances back and forth. Yeah. It's hard to pin it all just on that one.
Yeah, I mean, just from a pure hockey sense, the fans have certainly got their money's worth at the AAC for this homestand. Been a lot of crazy hockey played, but exciting hockey. I mean, win or lose, still exciting hockey at the AAC. Let's go back to before the game, Robert. Where a couple of guys that I thought have actually played pretty good, Ty Dellandrea and Nils Lundqvist, get the scratches, and Radek Faksa back in, as well as Joel Hanley.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate for Lundqvist because this is a game, right? Especially in the third period when Heiskanen goes down pretty much at the start of the third, where it's kind of next man up. Everyone has to kind of step up, and this would have been a chance to see, right? Can Nils Lundqvist, can he handle regular turns against an Avs team that's really pressing? Basically a situation that he's largely been sheltered from having to play in for a lot of the year. How he could have done. We didn't see that. My gut feeling is that they know, I mean, they even said it after the game. I think Duchesne said it post game, that they know what the Avs want to do is create chaos and use their speed and use the skill, especially their top line, and just keep the game so high octane that they pull guys out of position. And so you wonder if the coaching staff thought, okay, Joel Hanley, he's at home, right? We have last change. So we can use him in situations where he's not going to have to be a crucial part of the transition game, but he can kind of keep things settled down, allow Thomas Harley to do his thing, whereas they're maybe more worried about Lundqvist getting out of position, right? That's the gut feeling that I have, is that might have been their thinking. But it's unfortunate the way it worked out, because it would have been a really fun game to see him in, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Plus their physicality, I felt as though they tried to exert it at times, and heavy on the check, net front presence. I feel like a lot of teams are trying to do that against the Stars. And that's one of the concerns I see as we head toward the playoffs eventually is, and I know nowadays you can't quote unquote Craig Ludwig the guy out of the, in front of the net, with a two-hander. But at the same time, I mean,
well, unless you're Josh Manson, then you can cross check whoever you want.
It's that vet cup experience, I guess.
There you go.
But at the same time, it does, I do have a concern as far as it does seem as though a lot of times the Stars lose positioning in front of the net.
Mm-hmm. There's some good and bad when it comes to obviously the bad. Anytime you have an injury to Haskin, however bad it ends up being, I guess we'll find out tomorrow. The concern obviously is, what do you do? Because the D-core obviously isn't what they need it to be. It hasn't been what they need it to be, and it probably isn't what they want it to be. Just the fact that they've been rotating the defense and the pairings kind of tells you the coaches know that. And net front, especially against a team like the Avalanche, I mean, how many goals, right, were they able to stuff in at the front of the net or at the goal line, right, trickling behind Wedgwood? That stuff Drouin got. That's where you'd hope that that's where Lindell and Hakanpää would be able to be clearing them out or boxing them out. But when you have the pace of the Avalanche and a lot of good teams, frankly, Vegas was the same way we saw in the spring. It's not just about size anymore in today's NHL. It really is more about positioning. And the Avs are great at getting you out of position, especially when you're defending against them for long stretches, like we saw in the third period.
I brought this up with Sean, and Sean said to me yesterday, he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, I don't know how else to say it. As good as he is, I just don't read about Nathan MacKinnon like I do about the McDavids and the Matthews, and and I wanted to get your thoughts if you hear his name a lot. I mean, I hear it, but I just don't hear it in the same circles as some of the others. And it almost should be like, is this, could this guy be one of the best in the league?
Sure.
I mean, stats say yes, but it's not really talked about amongst like a lot of circles.
My theory is that one of the reasons, and maybe particularly people in Colorado, feel that he's underrated, because there has been some talk about him being a little underrated or underappreciated or whatever you call it lately, is that he's used differently than a lot of top line forwards. I mean, he plays more than most defensemen on teams, which is pretty uncommon for a forward. I mean, tonight he played over 26 minutes. Mikko Rantanen played 28 and a half minutes. I mean, the Avs use their forwards in a very different way than a lot of other teams. And frankly, when you have a player like MacKinnon who has a motor that never stops, when you have a guy like Makar you can put out with him, and I mean, Valeri Nichushkin played 24 minutes. I mean, when you see that they can do it, and Jared Bednar just won a cup with these guys, I think it leads them to believe this guy's out here basically every other shift, right? Especially we've seen in the playoffs, McKinnon's out there basically every other shift, so he kind of is your team. So where's in the All-Star voting and everything, MVP voting, he's generally he's gotten a lot of top 5 appearances. I think he's finished second once or twice in the last 5 or 6 years. To me, that feels about right. So I don't feel like he's underappreciated. I just feel like he's been playing behind, he's from the same place, right? He's from Cole Harbour, like Sidney Crosby. And Sidney Crosby, generational player, just at another level from day one, always kind of has been. Also has missed less time, I think, than McKinnon. Crosby, don't quote me on that. I'm going to get a lot of angry East Coast guys coming out at me now. But and now Connor McDavid, right, doing things just otherworldly. So I think McKinnon's kind of just been, it's kind of like we saw with Sergei Zubov back in the day. Like, he's really good, and the hometown people feel like, Lidstrom is constantly getting more press than Zubov. And right or wrong, that's just kind of the nature of being in, not one of those prime TV viewing markets. And, you're still a top 5 player at your position in the league consistently. That's great. I think that's enough for McKinnon. So I don't feel like he's, criminally underrated or anything. I think just the way he's used, combined with the fact that he is very good, causes maybe some people closer to him to want everyone else to see, you know what, this guy's actually better than Crosby. This guy's actually better than McDavid if you just watched him. And, to be fair, he's really exciting to watch. He really is. He really is.
He certainly is. Another guy that's really exciting to watch is Matt Duchene. And maybe the Heiskanen injury, if we'll see tomorrow, if he is out for a period of time, this might happen anyway, but I want to get your thoughts on running the power play through Duchene. Not necessarily put him in at the point, but I mean, his passing ability tonight and his eyes and just his sight line, just so impressive as far as, the puck movement and the ability to find, that player that's open especially the power play.
Yeah. Duchene, I mean, he had, I think it was a first assist on both goals. It was at least, I don't know what he was credited with, but he certainly set up both of those goals, right? Both on the power play with that just slick cross ice pass, no doubt, right? And that's, because he replaced Robertson, that's one thing you have to point to, that with Robertson, when he is struggling, not to say he is, but in overtime, he did hesitate a little bit and then ends up losing the puck. Duchene, it's rare that he hesitates. He always seems to have a plan for what he's going to do before he gets the puck. Once he beats a guy, right? Once Duchene turned a corner for that goal where Sagan ended up putting it away, he knew exactly what he was doing. He turned the corner and just didn't hesitate at all. And that's what you want to see from your top players. So you think that that's the sort of thing that you'd probably want on a power play, especially one that's been, not quite as stalled lately as it was for 4 or 5 games there. But yeah, especially, the Stars are going to need a spark. I think you probably keep Duchene up on that top power play, at least for a little while. You gotta be getting something from that top power play consistently. You just can't go dry for another 4 games. You really can't, especially as you go into late winter and spring. And Duchene always seems to add something, especially on the man advantage.
Yeah, maybe it was matchups, but I did think prior to the scratches, which were announced earlier today, I thought to myself, actually maybe Dellandre will be in and they might sit Dadonov again, like they did on the Florida road trip. And good move by Pete DeBoer, because I actually thought that line had good energy and real good legs, and Wyatt Johnston was extremely active.
He had a great game. Yeah, Wyatt had a great game.
Yeah, Wyatt was all over the place. I thought Dadonov was, quick and fast, although, one of the Colorado goals was a tough neutral ice turnover that he kind of overskated. But I think overall that was a good line tonight.
Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. You start to sweat. Your friends start to turn on you. You're forced to go on a last-second drink run and end up missing the game-winning touchdown while in line. Terrifying, isn't it? Luckily, you can avoid the drama with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your watch party. Compare prices across multiple stores in your area, find the best deals on game day drinks, and get back to armchair quarterbacking from, you guessed it, your armchair. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Presented by T-Mobile, the official wireless partner of Odyssey Sports. With an awesome network and great savings, there's never been a better time to join T-Mobile. Visit your neighborhood store to make the switch today.
Yeah, that line has had its warts. It was so good last year, right? Especially after they got Dadonov at the deadline, that they're kind of a victim of their own success in that regard, because how do you live up to that kind of down the stretch in crunch time and in the playoffs being such a great line in Johnston's rookie season? Now everyone knows him, right? And he's had to fight through some stuff. But I feel really confident, especially a game like this. Wyatt Johnston looked good, right? He matched up against a really good team in a really frenetic game, and he was all over it tonight. He looked really good. So I think that line is going to go as well as Johnston goes. I don't love everything about Dadonov's game when he gets there's some over try in there sometimes, like with that puck you mentioned, he overskated. That's getting a little, especially right after you go up by 2 goals. that's getting a little fancier than you need to in the neutral zone. Even the angle he's taken right there, you can kind of tell he's trying to get some extra separation and cut in with some speed, through the center of the neutral zone instead of making a slightly simpler play there. And I don't think the coaches are going to love that, even if it's not his fault. If the puck hits a puddle or something there, that's still a little rough. But I feel really good about that line because of Wyatt Johnston. First and foremost, he's only starting to look better after struggling a little bit early. I think they're going to be just fine, whatever matchups they get.
So Robert Tiffin joins us, and when he does, we have some good Twitter activity. So here we go, my friend. Good passion.
I'm sorry about that, I guess.
No, this is good. This is good, my man. Steven at Steady Rhythms was at the game. This may have been the most frustrating loss yet, perhaps with bias. 280 characters isn't enough to list every maddening mistake that dominoed into giving up a must-win game. If Miro's out long-term, this team is in jeopardy, right? It continues. It was so infuriating that the crowd was absolutely roaring during the 6-on-5, only for Fox to miss the easy empty net with all the time in the world, and then for Hakanpää to push Wedgwood into the net for the Avs to tie the game. It's almost like the hype distracts them. Well, okay, where do we start with Steven? Let's start with a positive, Robert. Absolutely love Steven's passion.
Hey, it sounds like he was at that game too. And
Yes.
These are the sorts of games that, like you said, you get your money's worth for these sorts of games. They're a blast, even if they don't turn out, at the end of the day and you have an injury. I mean, I was at the Stars game last playoffs against Seattle where Joe Pavelski came back and scored 4 goals.
Yeah.
And they lost against Seattle. It's such you have no idea how to feel walking out of a game like that because they lost, but you also know that you've seen something just incredible. So it's very, in a slightly lower on the scale, that was this game, right? This was a fun game. Both teams created great chances. Both goalies had some amazing saves. Georgiev had some incredible saves, especially in overtime. Stars probably deserved to win it in overtime before it even got to the goal.
Yeah, this is a game too where if a person was going for the first time, it creates those lasting memories that they want to go again. This is what develops fandom because this is the kind of hockey you want to bring a passive fan to say watch. And I mean, it was so up and down. It had a little bit of everything.
Yeah, my question would be, I think, to Steven, what's more frustrating, this game or the Montreal game, where they fell behind to a team they never should have trailed and then had a really frenetic comeback and came so close but didn't quite get there? They're both frustrating, but in very, very different ways. So not to be a Pollyanna or anything, but I think I'll take a game like this all day long, even though, the stakes are higher. It's a Central Division rival. Obviously the injury is a whole other thing. So you never want to see injuries. That's a different factor, but I'll still take a game like this, even with all the bad. I would also request that Radek Fox take a couple extra strides next time before he shoots at the empty net.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as if Miro's out long term, this team is in jeopardy, right? I mean, we're looking at Jake Ottinger being out fairly long term right now, and the team, is maintaining, and that's what you need to do when injuries happen. So we'll see. But at the same time, the problem is going to be the time on ice. That and everything that Miro does. And that's all encompassing. So that's going to be tough to replicate, but at the same time, a lot of veteran presence on this team. So, let's just get through tomorrow and see what it's all about. Sam Green seems like a cop-out, but can we blame the refs a touch here on this one? Also, I know we have no cap space and we can't just trade nothing for something, but how in the world do we win without a no Miro or Otter? We got to find a way to make a trade or something, right? Once again, let's find out how long the injury is. If it's a long injury, it might have been precautionary. You just don't know. So we'll find out tomorrow, Robert, but there is, as far as cap space, if he is out, then it does alleviate some cap space, but no amount of cap space is the point right now. That's you're not going to be able to go out in the market and get another Miro Heiskanen.
No, it's kind of like, why they say land's so valuable, they're not making it anymore, right?
Yeah.
Same,
I
same
like
for
that.
Miro, right? You don't see Miros, around. And we forget too, Cale Makar was drafted the spot right after Miro. There's
Oh, I
so many
remember.
cool narratives in games like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And that's why it hurts so much to see. And by the way, the Stars did a pretty good job of controlling Makar in
Yeah,
this game.
very
So
good.
that's a little bit underrated, I think. They give their forward core some credit for well, everyone really against McKinnon. Everyone's on deck. It's not just a defense on forwards matchup. Yeah, we'll see what they do. The Stars really are. I mean, it's been what we've talked about for a lot of the year, right? It's Heiskanen, and then it's everyone else. There's really not that true number 2 there. I will say we saw it in this game. Thomas Harley took Heiskanen's minutes in this game. That's what happened. He ended up with something like 24 minutes or 25 minutes in this game. He played every other shift. He played most of the shifts in overtime. I think Lindell had 1 half shift, and then there were a couple 3 forward shifts, which were really fun to watch. But it's clear that DeBoer, we already kind of saw it, and maybe they were trying to be, take it a little slow and not overload Harley.
Yeah.
But I think kind of now's the time, right? You're missing Ottinger, and if you're missing Heiskanen, now's the time you find out what Thomas Harley's made of. And quite frankly, it's time. I think he's shown he can handle it. And honestly, I'm kind of excited to see what he might do when you give him a challenge like that. And so you hand him the keys, as it were, see what he might do. So, again, a little bit of a bright side to a really dark cloud. But that could at least be a stopgap while they also look for a longer term solution if needed.
And one of the things that I did notice as far as how DeBoer plays minutes, when Nils Lundkvist does play, he plays a lot more minutes than Joel Hanley. Like, for instance, tonight you have an overtime game. Joel Hanley's only getting 11 minutes, 46 seconds. And, you go down the list, Hakanpää with 21, Suter with 19, Lindell with 26, and Harley with 24. That's not many more minutes than you usually see. Joel Hanley sticks around the 9 to 11 minute mark, whereas Lundkvist, they'll push a little bit more. So, Joel Hanley's a veteran, but it is interesting that you replace Nils Lundkvist, but then you protect him a lot as far as minutes.
Yeah, some of it was that second period was weird with the a fair amount of special teams, but yeah, I think it's clear that neither of them is really, the coaching staff's first choice for a regular third pairing defenseman. The other thing to be said, though, is that Lundkvist also, the last 3 games he got, I think, were 2 against Chicago and 1 against Montreal. So those are teams that are not in the same tier as the Avalanche. So you wonder if this is still kind of showing, okay, we still want to get Lundkvist some games when we can and give him a chance to show us what he's got. But in crunch time, kind of like we saw down the stretch last year, when the stakes really start to go up, if they are always going to turn to Joel Hanley and just try to shelter him, and if they don't quite trust Lundkvist yet, but we'll see. Especially now that there's no, they only have 6 defensemen right now, so we'll see what they do now, assuming Heiskanen isn't ready to go for the next game.
Yeah, as far as refereeing, we did touch on it, but I'm so glad you said that, Robert. I don't know how they looked at it on replay and still deemed that was a 4-minute high stick.
They reviewed it too.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the language. So I looked up the rule during the game to make sure I had the language right, and the exact language is when a player carries or holds any part of a stick above the shoulders and makes contact, with neck, head or face, so that injury results in the manner of drawing blood or otherwise, the referee shall assess a double minor penalty. So they reviewed it.
Yeah.
I didn't see any blood. Maybe there was some inside the lower lip. Right? He got hit hard. He got hit hard right there. It looked painful. And the way Heiskanen went down, that was obviously painful. He got hit pretty hard. Johnston's stick was fine. You have to be responsible for your stick, even if you are kind of falling down there.
Yeah,
but
it must be the otherwise part.
It's got to be, but that's so vague.
Right? Yeah, Miro came back out on the power play immediately.
We got to get away from that. I think that's something that the NHL could do better is just clean up that rule altogether and just make it a severity of contact type thing, right? Every stick in the face is different, but really one that kind of inches up and scrapes a guy in the neck and he throws a head back out of instinct, that should be different than one that like this that whacks him in the face, regardless of which one draws blood. I think you could usually tell pretty well which one is more serious. The blood thing is just so silly because it can be so arbitrary sometimes. Yeah,
absolutely. As far as some of the Stars no calls, it's tough to say. Sometimes the refs are going to call them, sometimes they're not.
I will say DeBoer was pretty animated about those too. You could tell on the bench about especially the cross check on Pavelski. That's right along the half wall at center ice, or right by the penalty boxes rather. I think it's center ice. That's right in the middle of the ice. That's a cross check, facing the boards. that's the sort of play, right? That at the start of last season or the season before, all the refs kind of got the memo, right?
Yep.
Let's cut down on the cross checks. So they know this is an issue. It's Wes McCauley and a pretty rookie ref. I think it's Braden Schrader. I might not have that name right, but Wes McCauley's been around a long time. Everyone knows him. A lot of times he's at the top of the player polls for the most liked official and things like that. So he's definitely a little bit more of a let him play type of guy. But man, that both of those, the one against Duchesne, but especially that one against Pavelski, that seemed to be the one that really set DeBoer off. And you can see why, because they're really the only reason not to call that is because you don't want to call a penalty at all in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. At MB10D, how concerning has Robertson's play been for you guys this season? Was not a fan of the final shift from him in OT, ultimately resulted in the loss. Stars also desperately need Otter back. Wedge is fine, but his rebound control has cost us at times. Cheers, guys. I think Wedgwood has done a real nice job as a backup goaltender coming in, but I mean, clearly we can see there's a difference, and that's why Wedgwood is the backup and, makes some really, really good saves. Stylistically, they're completely opposite. And, it's interesting. Also interesting that Jake Ottinger made the All-Star game. So that's a whole other podcast, right?
Well, dude, I'll give you one sentence. You know what? Jake Ottinger made the All-Star game because they can't afford to have Quinn Hughes miss the All-Star game. So if they get a different goalie, you have to take Thatcher Demko. You can only take one from every team. So Demko's in the Canucks, like Quinn Hughes. So if you take Demko, now Quinn Hughes has to be voted in by the fans. And the Hughes brothers thing is just it's one of the only really good, personality storylines the NHL seems to have, more broadly speaking, this year. So they can't risk Quinn Hughes not being at the All-Star game. So they always had to pick him. That means they need a goalie from another team. And you feel like they just went to the win column and just kind of went down the list. Yeah. And in fairness, it's not like the Stars have someone, they have tons of players who have been scoring a lot. I think they lead the league in double-digit goal scorers, which is good for the team. It just means you don't have quite the standout candidate anywhere else. So, all things being equal, the All-Star game selection process is about as meaningful as the All-Star game itself. So, good for Jake Ottinger. He deserved it. It's ironic because it's probably the worst start to a season he's had in the last 3 years. But this is the one he gets selected for. That's how it shakes out. Good for him.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of competition. Matt Duchesne would have been a nice candidate. At the same time, I think Stars fans take a step back and understand your goalie's in it, but also Connor Hellebuck's in there. So that would have been really tough. Yeah, because he has just vaulted Winnipeg this year and has been absolutely outstanding. So congrats to Jake Ottinger. Robertson's play, Robert.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's not like they're going to scratch him. At times we've seen Jason Robertson, but I will quietly raise the concern flag as far as it's just not the same puck. Seemed like the puck was hitting that stick perfect last year, and it doesn't seem like those same opportunities are coming his way. Craig did point out on the podcast a few weeks ago that he felt as though Robertson had to get kind of back to the basics, get in tight a little bit more, and get some rebounds, get that confidence going.
Yeah, I think you've seen that a little bit with Johnston. They're not identical in terms of the type of player they are, but you've seen that with Johnston where his play, you see his confidence in a lot of different plays, not just when he's coming down the wing with the puck or something like that, a more traditional like scoring chance type. Or at least, playmaking areas. You've seen that confidence in a lot of different places. And I think similarly for Robertson, he's at his best. It's tough. He's one of those goal scorers. It's fairly early in his career still, but he certainly gives you the feeling of one of those goal scorers. Mikko Rantanen's not dissimilar from him in a lot of ways, right? Pretty big guy who's going to have hot streaks and gonna have cooler streaks. The important part is that he's part of a really productive line, and that he gets hot enough and at the right times to be what you need. I think with Robertson also, there are some memories of like the playoffs last year. He started cold, right? And then he heated up, as the playoffs went on, to his credit. So maybe the same thing will happen this season too. And we'll see him continue to kind of heat up. He's that type of player, right? He's never going to be a, peak Jamie Benn, power forward who's just always going to be having those games. But in some ways, he's a little bit more like Jamie Benn now, where he's going to have games that look like that. And then he's going to have other games that seem a little quieter and, concern flag quietly raised. I think, clearly DeBoer felt that way, at least about the power play, and took him off, but he also put him right back out there in overtime. And, he had a pretty good shift on the second shift in overtime. And then at the very end of I think almost a 2-minute shift or a long shift in overtime, that's when he lost the puck. So,
yep.
We've seen enough Jason Robertson, I think, to have some frustrations, but I think concern is still just, again, he's a victim of his own success too.
Court Lee 8. I'm not saying the officiated handed Colorado the game, but I'm saying it was a flaming bag of dog mess. It's been atrocious all year, not just the Stars or against the Stars. Also love Radek Faksa. If he isn't back in the press box Saturday, I'm going to scream. Absolutely blew it. Couple Faksa comments tonight on that empty net, and that is always tough. It'll be interesting to see if the love from the coaches continues. I know they really like him as a player. I know they love how consistent he is as far as, always being healthy and always getting in the lineup. So I'll just say this, a couple of things. So for Stars fans, the NHL taketh the NHL giveth, the NHL taketh away. You scored 2 goals just recently against Nashville. And how do you think they felt against UC Soros? So that was 2 points that you probably shouldn't have had, or at least maybe you take home a point. Tonight you did get a point, but they took away a point. And that's the NHL. It's going to happen throughout the season. I love your point about hey, if you're going to be disappointed, Robert, you pointed out perfect. Be disappointed in Montreal the other night. It's a great point. It really is, my friend. That's because I'm with you. I didn't feel as though, I talked about it with Sean in the next pod, and he said, well, teams are going to lose games. And I totally get that. But if you're upset about tonight, and you do have a right, it's it's one of those high priority games because you're battling this team in the Central Division. But at the same time, probably could have put in a better effort against Montreal the other night. Landon Luschner says, Ben moved it to him. Great captain moving forward, trying to get guy going, but Ben had as good a look at the empty net as Faksa did. He should have at least tried to hit the empty net. Your teammate.
I don't know about that. I think when Ben had it, he was near his own blue line. So he was a little further away and he was turned the other direction. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I love it when your teammate David Castillo checks in and just says Faksa with an empty net.
Yeah. Well, I will say, back in the day, one of the coolest things, almost 10 years ago now, when Lindy Ruff took over, was him telling everyone, just shoot at the empty net. We'll take the icings all day long.
Yes.
And, at the end of the day, I kind of agree with that philosophy, because what's the upside to that? The downside's a 50-50 chance, right? Icing or maybe slightly below that, but especially the Stars are a pretty good faceoff team. A 50-50 faceoff chance in your zone. The upside, it's basically you win the game. If you score an empty net goal, you win the game. So if you have a good enough look to where you think you have a pretty good chance at hitting that empty net, yeah, take it. You can win the game right there, puck in your stick, and do it. So I think it's hard going from that. And then seeing a player who's been with the team a long time, and this could work out a certain way, and then you see them shoot it right into the defender, you think, what? Just look for a slightly better, treat that as a playmaking opportunity instead of got to get rid of the puck really quickly. But again, a player like Faksa, who's recently eaten some healthy scratches, you wonder if the pressure is a little bit higher on him. And he's not Tyler Seguin with the puck on his stick, nor should he be. He's a different type of player. So, you don't expect him necessarily to make the Matt Duchene sort of play right there. But it's still frustrating as a fan.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And for the next 9 days, here are your opponents: Predators, Wild, Predators, Blackhawks. So if Miro is going to be out, listen, they lost to Montreal the other night. But at the same time, I mean, those Nashville is fighting for a playoff spot, but the Stars are proving that they can beat Nashville. You're hitting Minnesota at the right time, I think, with Kirill going, being injured and out of your lineup. So, there are some winnable games in there. Yeah. All right. Matthew Moore. Dallas seemed better at cycling the puck, maintaining offensive zone pressure against the Avs, and they having games against other top teams this year. Did their game tonight have the same impression on you? And do you think that it's an area they need to improve for on the playoffs? What do you say about that, Matt?
I think that's a good way to kind of forestall their rush offense, because the Avs are so dangerous in the rush, is don't just go for a one and done chance in the zone, right? Especially with their defense. Their chances, right? Duchesne had one on, I think it was Ryan Johansson, where he saw, I can turn the corner in this guy, and he absolutely did, and it led to a goal. But there were other times where they were a little bit more patient in the zone. They had some good overlapping going on too, especially higher in the zone. Hints a couple times too, where they were actually getting momentum. And so then those handoffs, along the wall, you don't lose your chance when you hand off the puck because you got enough momentum going. So it seemed pretty intentional. That would be my guess, is that was part of their scouting, was, hey, we want to spend time in the offensive zone and not just take one good chance and then hand it to McKinnon and have to weather a rush and a ton of crazy zone time against. So let's try to wear them down in their zone a little bit and be a little bit more patient strategically. It seemed like it was part of their plan. Who knows if it actually was, but it certainly seemed like it. And honestly, it seemed like it worked pretty well. Against the Avs, you do whatever you can to slow them down, and keeping the puck in their end of the ice seems like the way to go.
Yeah, you retweeted Maziak to see how crazy the Central Division is. Avs are now 2-0 against the Stars. Stars are 2-0 against the Jets. The Jets are 2-0 against the Avs. That kind of says it all.
Hey, they deserve. There's your top three, right? That shows you what you're dealing with right there. It's all random. It's all random.
Yeah,
let's get to the playoffs.
Absolutely. Okay, so at Robert Tiffin, and each time he comes out with an article, so follow him. And when you see him post an article from D Magazine, the goal is hit that click and then click about 20 more times, just so we can get Robert to the top as far as those D Magazine clips. The same with my man, David Castillo. So what else can we promote for you, my friend? You're a beast.
I got some other stuff actually coming up in the pipeline, but I'm going to kind of save that for when it's all ready to go. But some other writing and stuff too. So there's stuff coming down the pike, but it's always good to check in with y'all. And I think it's going to keep being a fun season. Yeah,
absolutely. And send it our way, and I'll be sure to promote it on Spits and Suds. Thank you so much, man. Really, really appreciate it. I know it's late at night, and it's a big game, and I'm so glad I was able to talk about it with you.
Right on. Anytime, Gavin.
That's going to do it for another edition of Spits and Suds postgame. We'll have a fresh podcast out for you tomorrow right here on 105.3 The Fan.